Time for our press review, and I'm joined by Alison Sargent. Good morning, Alison.
Hi,
back to our top story. You've been taking a look at how the French press are reacting to Thursday's attack, which has been claimed by the Islamic State group just days before the first round of the presidential election set to take place.
Yeah, Don, just a few days ago, that attack was sort of imminent. There was a threat. Now that has become a reality. We can start with the front page today of the Figaro, the right-wing paper. They say terror once again strikes the center of Paris. Now, police officers were the target of this attack. One officer was killed, 2 others were seriously injured, and security forces are becoming really a regular target in terrorist attacks, as we saw recently in London. And the Figaro says that in France, they have paid a very heavy price in recent years. The paper reminds us that 9 members of France's police and army forces have been killed on attacks on French soil since 2012. Now, you might remember that was the year that Mohamed Merah attacked a Jewish school and also killed 3 French soldiers, 2 of whom were also Muslim.
Now, Le Parisien, meanwhile, has a more sensationalist front page than Le Figaro.
Yeah, their headline is Attack on the Champs-Élysées. It's an impressive group, and we see in the photo, actually, that they have, if you can pull that up. There's an impressive group of police cars there at the foot of the Arc de Triomphe. And in its editorial, Le Parisien aujourd'hui en France talks about dégoût and colère, disgust and anger. It's a very short and to-the-point editorial. They say police officers were targeted simply for being police officers, just as Jews have been targeted, and journalists, and people attending a concert, and children celebrating Bastille Day. So for the Parisien aujourd'hui en France, they say the threat is permanent, universal, and repugnant.
Now, at the very moment the attack was taking place on the Champs-Élysées, the 11 people hoping to wind up at the Élysée Palace were being interviewed on live television.
Yeah, they were being interviewed one by one for their first kind of big televised intervention before that first round. Each candidate had 15 minutes to convince voters, and they all ended up throwing some of their planned talking points out the window to react to the attack. You can see Libération's headline there, "The shooting invites itself into the presidential election special." Now, the left-wing paper says that Emmanuel Macron and the 2 leading candidates on the left, Benoît Hamon and Jean-Luc Mélenchon, all paid tribute to the police officer who was killed. That was their main reaction. But according to Libération, the 2 leading right-wing candidates, François Fillon and Marine Le Pen, really took advantage of the situation to talk about their security measures and their propositions to fight against terrorism, and they also blamed the current socialist government. Now, Le Monde also accuses François Fillon in particular of trying to capitalize on the attack. Le Monde reports that he had planned on making the economy his main talking point, but he decided to let that go and talk solely about the fight against terrorism. And they say that he then surprised everyone actually by suspending his campaign.
Now, despite the attack, many papers continuing to focus on other campaign themes.
That's right. Many papers are going ahead today with their top story in spite of the attack. We can start with a business paper, Les Echos. They're looking at the danger of extremes. The paper says that the risk of a runoff between the far-right Marine Le Pen and far-left Jean-Luc Mélenchon is putting global investors on the alert. And that is indeed a theme that we're seeing in the international press, and we're going to talk about that a little bit later. Meanwhile, 20 Minutes, the free street newspaper, reminds us that even before the attack, this campaign had been anything but smooth, and they couple that headline with a picture of those wrinkled campaign posters. They look back on the Penelope Gate scandal, the phenomenon that is Emmanuel Macron, and the unexpected rise of Jean-Luc Mélenchon. All of these events, they say, that marked a battle unlike any other. Now, left-leaning Libération focuses on the high stakes for all of the candidates. On their front page, they say they have everything to lose and then some. And finally, Catholic paper La Croix calls the presidential election a never-before-seen choice. Having 4 candidates, all equally likely to qualify for the second round, is a first in France.
Seems like it's really up in the air at this point in time. Does the French press give any endorsements?
They don't. It's much more rare. Usually they don't. It's much more rare in France than in a country like the United States, maybe, where papers will actually come out supporting a candidate. There haven't been any formal endorsements so far, although as we've seen, you can often tell which way a paper is leaning. L'Opinion, on its front page today, talks about the choice that voters are facing. They say they're choosing between the vote utile, futile, and subtil, so useful, futile, and subtle. The useful vote, as we've talked about, is helping a candidate that you sort of like. Maybe it's not your favorite, but you think they kind of have the best choice of winning, so you vote for them. Futile is voting for someone who either has no chance of winning or maybe just voting blank or, doing a write-in. And then subtle is a little bit like useful. It's making a calculated choice. And in that cartoon, on the front page of L'Opinion today, we see voters, two voters who are actually upset that François Hollande is not one of their choices, because they actually wanted to be able to vote against him. And one of them there is calling him a quitter. But François Hollande, as we see, is in his pajamas. He's there with his dog. He doesn't seem too unhappy not to be in the race this Sunday.
Thank you very much for that. Alison Sargent there with the press review. We're going to